I always have this vision of maybe it's sort of too idealistic, but the idea that we could potentially do both, where we license our music to these AI models, but potentially also craft some sort of a royalty or a crediting system where if our particular tracks or our music was sort of pulled up, right? So not only would you have my tracks with the metadata of the key and the emotional moods and all that and the instruments included, but it also would have my name, right? So if it ever pulled up sort of my particular situation, my particular track, or pulled some data from what I had submitted to it, it could somehow calculate that in a percentage of like, hey, we used, even if it's 0.2% of Jesse's tracks for this particular output, that there would be a sort of a crediting system that it's like, I would potentially get that. I don't know if that's even possible. Do you have any thoughts on that? If that's something that could be done?
No, no, that actually, unless that model, like specifically they decided to train a model just on your music, then they're going to be able to say, well, this music was generated by Jesse's, input, or yeah. So, and I think this is what's gonna happen. Like some artists will actually maybe feed all of their music to one of these models, and this model is going to be able to produce songs in their style, right? That's quite possible. But if like Pond5, let's say they feed all of their music, and there are Nikolai's music there, and there is your music there, at some point you cannot tell which, when you train a model and it took certain thing as a, like a feature, right? So what those models do, they select certain things and they say, well, this is a good feature, this is a good feature, and it's a very complicated process, and there are millions of those features, right, in a big model. And you cannot really say whether or not it's my input that affected that particular node in the output of the model or yours, right? Or it's a combination of two. So then you have to say, whoever submitted tracks for this model, all of them sort of have to be paid equally.
I see. So maybe on the way in, you would have an agreement that says, well, these are the 10 producers or composers that submitted to this model. So they would just split it up, whatever, 10 ways, essentially, no matter what music gets output from it. You would just understand that there was a sort of an exclusive and limited number of people that submitted to it. So that's good to know. I did not know that. I thought there was a way that we could potentially just tag ourselves into little points of data and pull that out. But it sounds like, according to you, that's just not possible.
Yeah, it's like if every time you produced music, I would ask you, well, you created this particular two bars. Who was the influence for those? Right? If you cannot answer that, like, and with a certain, like, time passes, you cannot answer that, right? Maybe when you started as a musician, you would say, well, yeah, those two bars are definitely Nirvana or Beatles, or, I was influenced by that. But then, do you pay royalties to them? No, they just influenced your music. And I think this conversation is going to go again, sort of, well, these are your influences, these are teachers, and they got paid when they submitted music. But whatever we produce is, our own. I don't know how the legal battle is going to go, but I feel like it's going to be the same kind of argument, right? And if you say, well, you have to pay whoever is influencing, then again, yeah, you have to go back, and now we start, we open a kind of worms where we say, now everybody who creates music, whether or not that's an AI model or person, they have to pay every person who influenced their style, which is probably not going to happen.
It's a great point, and we will have to kind of just keep our finger on this to see where these legal battles will rise up. Because obviously, you saw recently with the AI, Drake and the Weeknd song going viral. That's creating pushback from the Universal Music Group and the labels, obviously, of the world, who are saying, "Hey, hey, hey, this is potentially a huge disruptor for our source of revenue and for our artists." And so that obviously got taken down, and now I think this is sort of like the beginning of that new sort of legal battle of how we're going to navigate these waters. And I always find, like, my optimistic point of view is always to try to find the sort of win-win-win scenario where we don't stifle the technology, we don't shut it down, we don't resist it. We learn how to adapt it and adopt it and go along with it, but at the same time, not just immediately throw out everything that we loved before just because something new and shiny is sort of taking its place. I think there's a way that we can sort of, give credit to artists, give credit to composers, compensate them, and adopt this technology, and then create new opportunities for all of us and make sure that everybody's sort of feeling like this is something that's beneficial. But that's going to be a tricky puzzle to put together, of course, because we're kind of like discovering this whole new world that we never had, nothing was possible like this before. So